Good afternoon, students. So this week we're going to be doing week 5. I can't believe we've gotten so far to week 5. So we're a little bit we're halfway done with the class. And so this week we're going to cover satire and poetry. And so I'm going to read over today's poem. Satire is usually used when the author wants to make a point, and satire is a way of exaggerating something so much that it makes it obvious to the reader whatever point the writer wants to make. If it's a social injustice, for instance, satire brings out that social injustice in a very obvious way. And so that's what this poem does, is that it tries to bring out a social injustice. It's by using satire. So here's the poem. We Are Not Responsible by Harryette Mullen. We are not responsible for your lost or stolen relatives. We cannot guarantee your safety if you disobey our instructions. We do not endorse the causes or claims of people begging for handouts. We reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. Your ticket does not guarantee we will honor your reservations. In order to facilitate our procedures, please limit your carry-on luggage. Before taking off, please extinguish all smoldering resentments. If you cannot fully understand English, you will be moved out of the way. In the event of a loss, you'd better look out for yourself. Your insurance was canceled because you can no longer handle your frightful claims. Our handlers lost your luggage, and we are unable to find the key to your legal case. You were detained for interrogation because you fit the profile. You are not presumed to be innocent if the police have reason to suspect you are carrying a concealed wallet. It's not our fault you were born wearing a gang color. It's not our obligation to inform you of your rights. Step aside, because while our officer inspects your bad attitude, you have no rights we are bound to respect. Please remain calm, or we can be held responsible for what happens to you. And so today we will explore Harryette Mullen's poem, We Are Not Responsible. This poem engages with sensitive topics, so as we analyze it, we must remember to approach it with respect and mindfulness, following the ethical guidelines such as those outlined in the APA and AAC Christian Counseling Code of Ethics. These codes remind us to conduct ourselves with professionalism, empathy, and respect for the dignity of others, even as we critically analyze artistic works. At its core, We Are Not Responsible uses a persona to convey satire. The persona in the poem acts as a mouthpiece for commentary that may not reflect Mullen's own personal voice, but it is designed to highlight social, cultural, or political behaviors and attitudes in a critical way. Satire and poetry works by exaggerating or mocking certain behaviors, allowing readers to see them more clearly and reflect on their implications. In this poem, the persona seems to satirize a society or group that avoids accountability, shirks responsibility, or deflects blame for the consequences of their actions. By presenting these behaviors in a slightly absurd or exaggerated voice, Mullen forces the audience to notice patterns of irresponsibility that might otherwise be normalized. When we consider who the persona is addressing, it appears the poem speaks to a collective audience, perhaps society at large, certain institutions or specific groups who claim innocence or deny their part in societal issues. The persona's tone is often ironic, playful, and slightly accusatory, highlighting the absurdity of claiming we are not responsible when there is clear evidence to the contrary. Evidence from the poem itself, such as repeated claims of denial or attempts to resolve oneself from wrongdoing, demonstrates both the persona's sharp critique and their satirical edge. This duality, simultaneously humorous and critical, is characteristic of Mullen's style. One important way to engage with poetry is to extend it. Adding lines allows us to interact creatively while demonstrating comprehension. For example, one might add lines that continue the persona's ironic commentary, perhaps drawing to contemporary issues that mirror the poem's original targets. A possible addition could be, we wash our hands in rivers of excuse. We sip from cups labeled no guilt today and call it virtue while the walls crumble away. These lines build on the poem's central theme of avoiding responsibility. They extend the satire by emphasizing how denial is framed as acceptable or even virtuous, echoing the persona's ironic critique. Writing or performing editions like this allows readers to practice interpretation, creativity, and critical thinking while remaining grounded in textual evidence and thematic resonance. Finally, as we discuss this poem in our class, remember that satire can be biting and provocative, but it is always intended to encourage reflection and insight. Our analysis should focus on understanding the techniques that Mullen uses, the attitude of the persona, and the societal commentary embedded within the poem, all while maintaining ethical and respectful engagement. Let's break down her Harryette Mullen's We Are Not Responsible and explore its themes, persona, and satirical techniques in a lecture-style discussion. So today we will examine We Are Not Responsible. As we do, it's important to remember that this poem addresses sensitive topics that we must respect and be guided by the ethical principles of the AACC Christian Counseling Code of Ethics. This means engaging with the text respectfully, avoiding judgment, and being mindful of the experiences and identities the poem touches on. Satirical persona. The poem uses a persona, a speaker who is not Mullen herself, but a constructed voice to deliver its critique. This persona functions as a vehicle for satire. Satire in literature exaggerates or mocks certain behaviors, exposing contradictions, absurdities, or injustices in society. In the poem, the persona keeps on saying, we are not responsible, highlighting a tendency in institutions or society to avoid accountability. By framing these denials in formal, almost bureaucratic language, Mullen emphasizes how absurd and harmful such avoidance can be. Audience and tone. This persona is addressing those who are affected by these denials of responsibility, perhaps citizens, marginalized groups, or anyone caught in the systems of authority that the poem critiques. The tone is ironic, slightly accusatory, and often darkly humorous. For example, a line like, your ticket does not guarantee that we will honor your reservations, mocks the formal language of authority while revealing the real human consequences behind such statements. The persona's attitude is not sympathetic, it is critical, exposing the callousness of those who shirk responsibility while maintaining the appearance of control. Themes and commentary. The poem explores themes of institutional neglect, social injustice, and the absurdity of bureaucracy by listing failures of responsibility, lost luggage, ignored legal rights, arbitrary detentions. The poem paints a picture of systems that claims to serve people, but instead harms them. Mullen's use of repetition and formalized phrasing reinforces the satire, creating a voice that is both believable and absurd. The poem encourages readers to reflect on the real-world implications of such systems and question the authority that enforces them. One way to interact with the poem is to add your own line that continue the persona's ironic commentary. We apologize in advance for the consequences of your existence. We reserve the right to reassign blame at our discretion. Please enjoy our services while we ignore your protests. These lines extend the satire by emphasizing how institutions often frame negligence or harm as acceptable policy, reinforcing the poem's critique of irresponsibility and the absurdity of bureaucratic language. When adding lines like this, think about how they maintain the poem's ironic tone and continue the social commentary, ethical reflection. Finally, as we analyze and respond to Mullen's work, we must remain critical, we must remain ethical and empathetic. This poem critiques authority and systems that impact real lives. So it is crucial to separate the satirical persona from Mullen herself to avoid misdirected judgment and to consider the broader human experiences the poem illuminates. By doing so, we can appreciate the poem's artistry while responsibly engaging with its challenging content. And so think about how would you feel if you were the victim of this irresponsibility? Let's say that some bureaucrat or some program was promised to you, and then you go up to get your benefits of whatever that program is. Let's say you're an older person on Social Security. You're promised a certain amount of money, but you don't get it because of some new policy. And some politician says, oh, I'm making this new policy for the good of society. And meanwhile, that old person that relies on that Social Security check or relies on that grant, or a teacher or student that relies on a grant that was promised to them is suddenly gone because of some bureaucrat and some new policy. And then they just shirk their responsibility by saying, oh, it's to cut spending, to cut waste, to cut fraud. So in what way does this poem touch upon contemporary issues today? And also, how would Jesus react to this kind of behavior? If Jesus were alive today, would he deny benefits to the poor? Would he deny food stamps to the poor? Who would Jesus help? Would Jesus help the rich and the bureaucrats? Or would Jesus help the downtrodden and the poor? And so think about the biblical implications. If one considers oneself a Christian, then how can you ignore your responsibility to help those that are downtrodden? And if you look the other way and still claim that you're a Christian, does that not make this poem even more poignant by saying, no, it's not my responsibility, but I'm a Christian anyway? That seems to me my take on this poem. But the fun thing about literature is that you can have other takes. Everybody can have a different interpretation of how they read this poem. And so this week we will discuss your interpretation of this poem. There is no right or wrong answer when we interpret literature, because when we interpret literature, it's all based on our life experiences. It's based on our points of view. And so it's good to have a good debate on opposite points of view without pointing fingers and being angry at each other. It's always healthy to always be able to hear what the other side has to think and to add to the debate, because then that adds to our intelligent knowledge of the world. And one thing I'd like to ask all of you is that, how would Jesus react to any of this? How would Jesus react to the contemporary issues brought up in this poem? If Jesus were to rewrite this poem, what would it sound like? That's what I want you to think about in this week's in this week's forum, and also think about how is satire used to bring out a point of view. If you want to read more satirical news articles, you can go to the Onion online and then you could even discuss some of the articles on the Onion and how and why satire is used to bring out the writer's point of view. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me at any time. And if you like this video, don't forget to subscribe to the Professor H Writing channel.